Hello, ladies and gentlemen. It is once again that time of the week. Oh, what time of the week is it? Well, it is that very special time of the week, right in the middle of the week, where you really need that dose of truth. It is the Hoodrat Strategist radio program, only on 89.1 WIDR Kalamazoo. We are a political talk, discussion, and news program. We feature local and national activists. And generally, we try to dig underneath the headlines and call out the establishment on its BS. Now, as always, the following thoughts, views, and opinions are not necessarily those... Hold on just a second. Yes. Helped out them with some stuff. Hello again. Sorry about that. Yes. The following thoughts, views, and opinions are not necessarily those of 89.1 FM, WIDR Kalamazoo, or Western Michigan University. So I'm joined here by my co-host, Lawrence. Sorry, we're still getting everything. Kind of said it.
Yo, what up?
Yo. All right.
Yo.
So we got a pretty interesting show today. A lot of stuff to pack in. We talk about what happened down in Parksville, Florida last week, and there has certainly been some development since then. Also going to be hitting on... we've got some BS coming out of the Supreme Court.
Oh man,
couple of them actually.
We have students who survived school shootings being threatened by the alt-right.
Oh yeah, isn't that fun?
I mean, there were a lot of funny things that happened. There was still a lot of good things. Black Panther is still breaking records.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, Black Panther is still breaking records, and that movie is absolutely awesome. Yep. And I will be going to see it again this week.
Yep. They're actually they did a long discussion about it on Democracy Now! This morning.
Yeah, I didn't get a chance to see it. I was at work. I've been at work all day, and my job doesn't like when I talk about politics. It's one of those things. But yeah, man, just there were a lot of interesting things. There was a lot of just disgusting moments over this past week of stupid.
We've got there's a story I want to talk about later on with involving the gubernatorial race. Who's getting money from whom, and all of that fun stuff. Also, later on around 6:30, we're going to have a guest on the program, Eugene Strong, to talk about everybody's favorite local racist statue, because I guess every town's got to have at least one.
I mean, it's not America unless you have a racist statue that depicts the inhumanity of America. It's not America. It's not America.
Well, if you went back to what the original artist had to say,
I mean, look. This is. I mean, I'm not going to be here for that, so I'll give my 2 cents on that right now. The best way for these statues to still be where they need to be, and
by the way, we're talking about the Fountain of the Pioneers. It's in Bronson Park.
Yeah. Here's the thing, because the local Native American tribe has already given their piece about it. And if you have people who are still upset about it, the best way to do it is that we have a museum literally down the street. Let's knock down the fountain. Let's replace it with something else that is more representative of how great Kalamazoo is, and let's put the original fountain design, picture, whatever, in the Kalamazoo Museum with context, so people can understand where the statue, how the statue came about, what it actually represents, who actually did it. Like, give it full context, and that would appease everyone.
Yeah, it would, but
and besides, the statue's broken anyway. Like, we need to fix it.
but I mean, the thing about that, Lawrence, is, and this is basically what a lot of the people said to the city commission when this has come up. It's like, but it would be so hard. Oh, it'll be really expensive to move it, and you gotta blah 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 blah. And I mean, they're offering the people who want to restore the statue. I'm sorry, I'll just wrap this up, and we'll delve into that in a lot greater depth later. But I did want to say, like, there are a lot of people in the community who have pooled together about $500,000 to restore it. So I'm like, why not just take that money and use it to move it wherever it can be moved? So
not even move it. Just tear it down and build something new.
Yeah,
it's not like Kalamazoo. It's not like Kalamazoo's not rebuilding stuff literally downtown right now. But okay, the one thing that I wanted to talk about, and that
you brought some really good truth bombs about this whole the explosion and the gun control.
Oh, not just
that's probably a poor choice of words. I'm sorry.
Oh no. Like, that is something that we can talk about after the first break. Yeah. But the initial thing that I want to talk about, which is not getting enough news coverage, why in the hell is U.S. troops in the Black Sea of Russia? For those who do not know what I'm talking about, The Hill reported. Let me pull up the article. The Hill reported that the was it the NSA or
actually, I did not get a chance to watch this video, but
the Pentagon sends U.S. ships to Russia's borders in the Black Sea. They are doing this as for military support, quote unquote, just in case Russia starts getting antsy about annexing another country or some other garbage. Folks, let me give you context here. America is the most powerful superpower nation in the world. America blames Russia for meddling in our election, and we are sending U.S. troops to its border like we are Team America World Police.
And we've been doing this for a while, but, like, broaden it out a little bit. Even as Obama was leaving office, he was being applauded by certain mainstream media sources, like Rachel Maddow comes to mind, for putting more troops at the Russian borders. And for a little more context on that, NATO and our surrounding countries, we have bases all along the Russian border. And, I don't know why does Russia have to have their border so close to our bases? It's very aggressive. But
I'm sorry to interrupt, but the thing that pisses me off about this is twofold. One, do we remember in America how we felt when Russia put armaments in Cuba?
Yeah.
Did we just say, hey, that's a passing nod? It's not really important. That's not really important. No, we didn't. We put the doomsday clock to 2 minutes before midnight. And where is it now? 2 minutes before midnight. It's the closest it's been to midnight since the Cold War, since the Cuban Missile Crisis. Not to mention, we already a few weeks ago had a U.S. plane and a Russian airplane almost collide with each other in Russia's airspace. To give better context, if Russia tries to annex Crimea or try to move into their territory, then NATO would take care of it. Why? Because NATO's already there. We are a part of NATO, so is Crimea. The thing is that we can protect our allies. I have no problem with us protecting our allies. I have a problem with escalating. And us moving warships into the Black Sea is escalating. It's escalating for no. It's escalating because people believe that 13 Twitter trolls affected the election. After we've already put sanctions on Russia, we've put more sanctions on Russia, and we've already and Mueller's already doing his indictment. We have already moved. There's already been more NATO troops build up on Russia's border. America does not control NATO alone. America does not control NATO. And the fact that we're escalating by moving more of our armaments into the Black Sea is saying, hey, we are the world's most powerful nuclear power in the world, and we had our feelings hurt because we felt like this other nuclear powered superpower affected our election. Meanwhile, America meddles in every other election in the world. Same with every other country.
Oh yeah, I mean, you look at if you look at like Latin America, if we don't historically, if we haven't liked the outcome of their elections, we just play a game of Pop Goes the Leader. But this actually brings up a really good point. I'm glad you brought it up on the show today, and I was thinking about this earlier. And granted, we talk a lot about this on the show, and all of these discussions about like is Russiagate real? Is it basically equivalent to weapons of mass destruction? And the problem is you have to deconstruct it a little bit more than that. From what I've seen, there is some like real stuff. Like Russiagate is real, but if you're talking about the context of how it affected the actual integrity of our election, yeah, it's real, and it's really insignificant. And what the bigger story is, I feel, with all this Russiagate stuff, is how they're taking a lot of these stories about like this collusion, or kind of these hinky things going on with Russia and their activities, be it the lawyer going to visit Trump Jr. or these memes that we just brought up, or a little bit more significantly, several months ago, The Intercept featured that article where they hacked the Russian government, supposedly like hacked into several states' voting systems. Actually, none of them were swing states. I do want to bring that up just to be like, okay, they did do that, but it didn't really have any sort of effect.
An ally country saw Russia hack into the United States. It was one of our allies. I forgot which ally country it was.
And this wasn't the DNC. This was the voting systems in several states.
And several swing states.
Actually, they weren't even swing states.
They were
a few, like, all the lists that I saw were all either deep blue or deep red. Is that a problem? Oh yeah, that's definitely an issue. However, it doesn't rise too far above the kind of espionage that the main superpowers do against each other literally all the time. So you take these bits of reality, and what's really fascinating and scary about what goes on with Russiagate is how you use that narrative to prime people up for conflict. You mentioned last week, we were talking about the rhetoric around the latest indictment with the 13 Russian trolls, and you had sitting Congress people comparing it to Pearl Harbor, comparing it to talking about it as an act of war. And I talk to a lot of people who, they summon a lot more outrage about this than me. I think it has a lot. It's like, it's almost like if you're a bit more nationalistic, you're just deeply offended that a foreign country is doing anything to meddle in our elections, even if it's comparatively light compared to what's going on here. But if you have this idea that, well, Putin or Russia should be punished for it, well, what does that punishment look like? You might say, no, I don't want to go to war with Russia, but you know what? The power brokers in Washington, the military-industrial complex, they don't care that you don't want to go all the way to war with Russia, but they want enough people to be okay with it that if it does escalate into that conflict, they have a precedent for it. They have something that will be acceptable to bounce off of, and they'll just be able to say they interfered in our election, so it's okay that we're escalating into open war with the superpower. And even the Pentagon has talked about how they are going to be making a shift away from the war on terror to basically building up their defenses and strategies against the superpowers of Russia and China.
I mean, it goes back to two things. One, Noam Chomsky wrote a book about manufacturing consent and how the mainstream media and how our government will manufacture boogeymen to have the American people believe that we need to be in offensive wars, i.e., Iraq and Afghanistan. We were manufactured of consent of the consensus saying that was a good idea when it was completely and utterly garbage. This in the second part is on substance. The Mueller investigation is two parts. One, you had Russian trolls stealing people's identities, committing fraud, doing money laundering, things like that. And those acts are also connected, and some of those people may be connected to the Trump administration. Okay, I get that. That's cool. If they can match those links. One of Trump's advisors have a lot of his advisors are now working with the Mueller investigation. One of his key people, I forgot who the dude is. They just got done talking about it on Secular Talk and Young Turks. Is flipped. I think it's Gates. The charges on Gates have been dropped because he's working with the Mueller investigation. So, yeah, there is a there. There is smoke there, and there's probably fire there. With that being said, we don't need to send our army and our navy to Russia's border. We don't need to be goading them into accidentally hitting us or attacking us, because we are escalating. And how it will be sold to us is that they started first, but we've been constantly building up on Russia's border. Now, let me say it again, because I know we're going to get some people. There's going to be people that listen to this. I do not like Putin. Putin is an authoritarian.
We're not Putin puppets.
No, yeah. Putin is an authoritarian dictator who murders his opposition and journalists that does not agree with him. He is a very horrible human being. With that being said, we need tact, and we're not using tact right now. We're not using diplomacy. We're not thinking logically, because we're escalating with conflict. And also remember, how did America respond to Pearl Harbor, and how did America respond to the Cuban Missile Crisis? They responded to Pearl Harbor by going into war. We responded to the Cuban Missile Crisis by almost going to war with Russia. Like, this is not something... Yeah, we almost did. This is not something that we need to do. This is not something that... Everyone who cares about the fate of our planet should be outraged at this.
And, I'm going to pull this up real quick. People really forget how close we really came. Like, there's this famous story of this Soviet submarine officer who was on a nuclear sub, Vasily I'm probably gonna slaughter this, but Vasily Arkhipov, and basically they thought that America had launched their nukes because of basically like this kind of like error on the radar system, and his comrade, we were like, let's follow the procedure. Let's get this started. But he was the dissenting voice. There were 3 officers that had to agree to launch nuclear weapons, and he refused because he was like, we need to basically make sure this is what it actually is. So we were one guy, this one man literally stopped nuclear Armageddon. This is not something that you play around with. This is not something that you say, oh, well, like escalating tensions aren't going to lead to that. Saying it's going to lead to like World War III is hyperbolic. And it's a really glaring example of American privilege. It's like you said, like how would we take it if Russia or China or another superpower started putting a bunch of bases and Navy ships off of, say, the coast of New York City or the coast of California or along the Mexican-Canadian border?
No, yeah. Like, imagine if there was a Russian submarine in the Gulf of Mexico right off the coast of Texas.
Yeah.
Are we kidding? Like, are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? Yeah. CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, they would be losing their mind right now.
Oh man.
Like, are you like what? What? Like, that's not even a question. Mm-hmm. That's how you know the cognitive dissonance between what's most important and what's being talked about. I guarantee Trump's affairs with porn stars was being talked about on the news. I guarantee that Donald Trump's ugly remarks about how he would run into the school with a gun when Donald Trump has not ran in 40 years was being talked about. Who's talking about why our troops is in the Black Sea? Why is our troops there? Why are we there? Why are they there? They don't need to be there. That needs to be screened from the hills from every person in power, every citizen that understands the fate of the world this is not for the faint of heart. Things could go bad. You do not stack up plastic cups on a wobbly table.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And think it's not going to fall down.
And, just keep in mind, like, this is a very dangerous game that I don't know if you'd call it military-industrial complex or like the deep state, but like the ruling oligarchic class in the United States is playing, because this has been done before. This is part of, as far as you can compare it to like the WMDs in Iraq, it's being used in a similar way in that when there are problems in the homeland, you distract them with a foreign adversary. And I really do believe in 2016, that was really the election that it was kind of a tipping point. Enough people figured out that, hey, there is something wrong with our democracy. Our elections are not as free and fair as we've been led to believe. So, to make sure people do not focus on the problems here at home, you find a foreign boogeyman. You find somebody who did some hinky stuff during the 2016 election, and you foist all of the attention, all of the blame onto them, this being Russia. But please keep in mind, if media coverage were proportional, if we were proportional about what actually affected the 2016 election, Rachel Maddow wouldn't shut up about Chris Kobach. She would go on all day talking about voter ID laws.
Cross-check.
She would be talking about what happened with the DNC Fraud Lawsuit. And then maybe every couple of months on Democracy Now!, you'd hear something about Russian interference. See, it proportionally everything that altered the outcome of that election happened right here at home. That $6 billion in media coverage. The election fraud that happened during the primary. Those 200,000 ballots that got thrown out in Brooklyn. All of the and you know what? I mean, we've got another article to talk about with that.
No, like, that's we're going to here's the thing. Just to wrap this up before we go to our first break. For you as the average American, call your congressman, call your senator, call your representative, and ask them, why is our Navy in the Black Sea? Why is our Navy in the Black Sea? Our Navy should not be in the Black Sea. Pull them out. Tell the president to pull them out. Mm-hmm. Hold them accountable. Hold them accountable, because if we don't, things can get real ugly real quick.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Right. You want to take a break?
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. Let's go ahead and take a break. You are listening to the Hoodrat Strategist radio program, only on 89.1 WIDR Kalamazoo, your only source for political revolution.
Be apparent, but hunger is a rather prominent issue amongst the student body of Western. The Invisible Need Project is a multifaceted initiative that's aimed to help struggling students. Every 2 weeks, generous people donate their food to the pantry located in the Fawn Student Service buildings or other drop-off locations. All you need to do is grab a reusable bag and grab whatever food you need to help sustain yourself. If anyone's unsure when their next meal will be, or if you have a little extra food you'd be willing to donate, the food pantry is your place. If you're looking to help donate, become a volunteer, or just learn more, call 269-387-4742 or email dosa-inp@wmich.edu for details.
Are you trying to get your local Kalamazoo business name out to the WMU and Greater Kalamazoo communities? Why not do so while supporting Radio Evolution through underwriting and donations? For more information, please visit widrfm.org.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. We are back. This is the Hoodrat Strategist radio program. Next thing we wanted to talk about, and we spent some time on this at the last show, but we've got some really important follow-up stuff from last week. One thing to note, it's been about 2 weeks since the shooting, and the momentum from these kids still hasn't slowed down, which is actually pretty unprecedented. As we said last week, with these mass shootings in America, I mean, this is a really sad thing. You know, it goes through a very typical cycle. It happens. Everybody argues with each other on the internet about gun control. What could we have done to stop it? Thoughts and prayers. Something really interesting in that video that I was watching, though, is the whole thoughts and prayers thing. That's not exclusive to Republicans. The DCCC will actually coach their own politicians to not politicize these events until, a week after or something like that.
The DCCC, the DNC and the DCCC put out a memo after the Las Vegas shooting that said, do not politicize the mass shooting. Your constituents and yourself will be absolutely outraged, but only send prayers and condolences. That was a memo that was sent to politicians that's supposed to represent you as Democrats. So we're not going to politicize this. We're not going to talk about policy, because when you politicize something, you talk about policy. Mm-hmm. So that's what brings me to this point right here. I was like, turn me down the headphones. Turn me down. That brings me to this point right here. CNN poll that just came out. 72% of a CNN poll that just came out. 72% support stricter gun control compared to 27% that oppose it.
And that's just liberals, right?
No. That's all Americans.
All Whoa.
No. Wait. Hold on.
Okay.
Hold on. Wait. I got more for you. USA Today poll. 76% of Americans, Democrats, Republicans, Independents, and whoever else is in the middle, want to ban people with mental illness from purchasing guns. 63% want a semi-automatic weapons ban. And Quinnipiac poll that came out, 97% of Americans want universal background checks.
That is really amazing, because I'll be clear, I grew up in a really gun heavy household. My old man is a single issue voter. Everybody's going to take away his guns. I've said on the program before, I'm probably the most kind of libertarian when it comes to gun control, but I'm also cognizant enough to understand that, one, you have to follow where the evidence leads. There's comparable systems in other countries that do curb gun violence, and also you got to go with what the majority wants. And frankly, before I saw that stat, my optimism about sensible gun legislation was pretty low, because I assume it's pretty split. Half the country's okay with it, the other half just thinks any kind of gun control is going to take away all the guns. But we're seeing a real change, and a change that's happened in the span of just a couple of months, right, Lawrence?
No, wait. After Sandy Hook, just to give context, after Sandy Hook, 92% of Americans, that's including gun owners, wanted universal background checks. It went up 5%.
Yeah.
It went up 5%. What? So, and it's not just that. I have other polls that I can bring up as well, but this is the thing that we always talk about on this show in particular. The majority of NRA members support the things that support the stats and support the bans and the regulation that I just talked about. They are right, in the overwhelming majority of Americans.
And
the thing. Oh, sorry. No, just one second. Yeah. The reason why we're not going to have it is because 3% of the country, which is the NRA and the NRA leadership and gun manufacturers, do not want that. They do not want that because they bought our politicians to not do anything.
And I do want to kind of let people know, and this is kind of a brief history of the NRA, not a total history, but it was around the late 70s, because the NRA, as it exists today, that's not what it used to look like. The NRA actually used to be what they say they are, which is we stand for, we want to teach people about gun safety, where we help hunters and shooting enthusiasts. It was more like a club. It was around the 80s, mid 80s, the kind of the Reagan Revolution, that they changed to be more of just a literal lobbying arm for the gun manufacturing industry. Keep in mind, we talk a lot, especially right-wing people talk a lot about, making sure that we maintain gun rights. And, keep in mind, it wasn't until the Bush administration that assault rifles were actually legal for civilians to have. That's a very recent development. So it's not about maintaining gun rights from people who want to take all of them away. It's about returning gun legislation to like, a sane place. Because I really do not understand why people think they need assault rifles. But, yeah.
I mean, and when you talk about the transformation of our country, Wayne LaPierre was actually for gun-free zones at schools.
Yep.
And that is real. Go back and look it up. It's back during the 90s. It's during one of his speeches. He's for gun-free zones. Now he's for giving teacher guns.
Yeah, and it's how, like, it's just how much money has been pumped into gun lobbying that, like, the Overton window has just shifted so much that we are in a place where, again, like, this is the only country that stuff like this happens. That's a recurring Onion headline. Go ahead.
No. Yeah. The other thing that I wanted to get at, that's a major change, is that before there were corporations that would still support the NRA even after the mass shootings, even after the craziness. They would still support the NRA. Over 16 companies has now cut their ties with the NRA. Dick's Sporting Goods, which is a sporting goods shop,
I saw that. Yeah.
sells sporting goods. They sell basketballs. They used to sell guns too. Now they're not selling assault rifles. They're not selling long rifles again. The gun insanity, the blood money that comes from the NRA and weapons manufacturers is so bad that Dick's Sporting Goods said we're not selling guns anymore. Mm-hmm. Like, wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Okay.
That's how you know it's gotten bad. Like, jeez Christ.
Here's and something interesting too, that I think, like, I've seen recently, the terrain of gun ownership and gun rights, it's shifting in a very unique way where left-leaning gun enthusiasts are coming out of the woodwork in solid numbers, and they will talk about, like, the importance of maintaining gun rights but also having sensible gun legislation. And I think this is something new for the NRA. Like, Wayne LaPierre. Yeah. He had a speech recently talking about how all of this new push for gun control is based on, like, all these socialists and Marxists are communists are trying to do. And I'm listening to this like, dude, most of the communists I know want the working class to be armed. So okay, here's my proposal. I think groups like Redneck Revolt and the Socialist Rifle Association should like pull a dim enter on the NRA and just fill it with a bunch of, like, armed leftists.
No, here's the thing. The NRA has sensible people. Like, the members of the NRA, a majority of them are sensible. A majority of them want comprehensive gun legislation. They're on the side of the American people. It's the gun manufacturers who buy politicians and the NRA who are the propaganda wing of said gun manufacturers. And just to prove my point, May 1st, 1999. If you look up the video, it's on C-SPAN. Wayne LaPierre is giving a speech, and he is talking about gun-free zones and not giving teachers guns. He's talking about comprehensive, he's talking about gun legislation and policies that he is absolutely against now because of the money that the weapon manufacturers get. It's not rocket science every time there's a mass shooting that Winchester's stock value goes up. It's not rocket science. The reason why is because after a mass shooting, people get scared and buy more guns. Why? Because people swallowed this notion that the only thing that can stop a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun. And case in point, the armed guard that was at the school in Florida did not go in to the school. And also, case in point, also remember, the FBI said in 2015 that a good Samaritan with a gun only stops a mass shooter 12% of the time, which means that 88% of the time, that vigilante is either going to shoot himself He's going to shoot a random civilian, or he's going to get shot by either the mass shooter or the police. The reason why is because the police does not know that he's a mass shooter. And also, when there's a mass shooting, like at the Pulse nightclub, and a mass shooter is going to go in and start shooting, he already knows who has a gun. So those people are getting targeted first.
Yeah, not to mention, I mean, even in places where, where there was that shooting at a military fort. I'm forgetting the name. But it was a mass shooting that took place on a military base. And, I mean, I think that just goes to show, even the most well-trained, most disciplined individuals, if they're caught off guard, it is very, very difficult to stop a shooter from doing this. Like, even somebody brought up this example and it really stuck with me. Chris Kyle, he's the subject of the American Sniper film and book, and say whatever else you will about him, but the day he was murdered, he was going off with this other veteran who was a little bit unhinged, and he was even texting people back and forth saying, this guy, he's giving me a bad vibe, I'm gonna be like alert. They went out to the shooting range and he ended up getting killed. And this is somebody who at the time was like the most experienced and well-trained marksman in the American military, and he got shot by somebody with a gun who was having a bad day. Like that.
Yeah. And also, when you hear people say, well, if you just arm teachers and have armed guards, remember, children, that if you just arm school officials and arm teachers at schools, that they can stop, and they'll be fine. Remember, children, Philando Castile was a school personnel,
an NRA member,
and also a concealed license. He also had a concealed license carry. He was everything that the NRA wanted, and he was shot by the police within 10 seconds. So let's also remember. And D.L. Hughley said this as a comedian, and I know I shouldn't be joking about this. You are going to pay a teacher $30,000 to $40,000 a year, and you're going to hand them a gun with students that they cannot whoop or put their hands on, but you're going to give them a gun. School shootings might go down, but school robberies is going up. That's the other thing. I'm like, there are so many dumb things when it comes to people having the ideas about giving teachers guns or things like that. But when you hear people say that gun bans don't work, or the American people don't want that, or it will never, or the American people do not support of gun reform, they are lying to you. The overwhelming majority of Americans want comprehensive gun legislation. Over 60 to 90 to 80% of them want comprehensive gun legislation. It's not even close. The American people want it.
And I want to just hop on something with teachers. One, I'm going to read this. This is something that's been going around on social media, and it really sums up the whole idea of like arming teachers. And this is actually something my dad advocated growing up. It's like, we wouldn't have these problems if teachers had guns. And beyond any issues of like safety, that puts a responsibility on civil servants that we have really, like, historically been mistreating in the last several decades. And this is a guy named Jason Reed, and he says, the suggestion of arming the teachers in response to school shootings is really not that surprising. As a nation, we have hoisted pretty much every social problem onto teachers, expecting schools to be the solution for everything from unemployment to teen pregnancy and the war on drugs. All the while cutting their funding and lambasting them as lazy and selfish when they demand to be paid. Kind of like what's going on in West Virginia right now. They got
a 5% pay raise.
Yep, they are the solution, scapegoat, and sacrificial lamb rolled into one. And I mean, that really, like, what kind of asinine solution talks about, on the one hand, giving teachers a life or death responsibility, while at the same time, I mean, it's like that double talk that you hear from a lot of conservative politicians. Oh, we love our teachers, but we want to destroy their unions. Like the Supreme Court case that's going on right now with Janice.
Oh my God. Okay, before I leave, let's go take one more break. And before I leave, yeah, let's hop on that Supreme Court. What the Supreme Court's been doing? Because my God, my God,
oh, man. Actually, well, we can hop into that now. It's about 5:50. Okay. Well, but I mean, two things that start. But do you want to talk about the union case or that immigration thing?
Let's talk about the okay. Yeah. Let's. Okay. First of all, it's been Puerto Rico. The majority of Puerto Rico will not have power until maybe August or something. There was something that Democracy Now! Just got done talking about. The disaster relief vultures are trying to privatize the education, the infrastructure, and all that in Puerto Rico.
Disaster capitalism.
Yeah, disaster capitalism. And Puerto Rico is in Puerto Rico, the majority of Puerto Rico won't have power until the middle of next year. And remember, the storm hit 4 or 5 months ago, like 4.
Yeah, like, about 4 or 5 months ago.
So I mean, I'm not good with numbers, so anyway. But that's not the point. The thing that is really bad, besides people forgetting about Puerto Rico, is that the Supreme Court said that ICE and other officials can detain immigrants indefinitely without them being able to post bail, without them being able to being able to get out of jail or detention. Yeah. So we can legally capture you and put you into a cell, and we do not have to let you go because you are an illegal immigrant from this country. Are you absolutely kidding me? Like, are you gonna play the video?
Well, I'm looking for a particular clip right now, but one of the things I wanted to mention, when we talk about this is, okay, so if you haven't been in the criminal justice system, it's just, it is de facto, or what's the word I'm looking for? It is. You should be able to post bond. That's just typical. You always should have that ability. You basically have a bond hearing with a judge, and you can be let out until you're sentenced. Undocumented folks do not have this option. They are just continuously detained. And while a lot of people are, outraged at how ICE has kind of transformed under the Trump administration to be this more fascistic entity, this is nothing new. This goes as far back as the Clinton years, where this has been the status quo, that you can just detain undocumented folks. It's basically just a continuation of that. I was scoping around for this clip, but I think I'll just kind of paraphrase. But
wait, I got. See, before you play the clip, remember, folks. Remember the State of the Union when Donald Trump was saying illegal immigrants are bad and they're none but MS-13 members. Oakland police chief said that they made, and I'm paraphrasing his quote, that they made their greatest headway by arresting those that victimized illegal immigrants, because the illegal immigrants trust the police to not take them to ICE, but to do their job and to protect and serve them, despite their documentation. So, and also, multiple studies have shown that sanctuary cities are safer than normal American cities because undocumented people do not commit as much crime. because they're afraid of being detained indefinitely.
Right. Yeah.
And they're more willing to talk to the police when the police will do their job and get the people who has harmed them. But the only way the police can get who's harmed them if they speak to the people who's undocumented and not throw them in jail. It works both ways.
That's
and
right.
also for those, and also for my Republican friends and other people who are like, well, you know, they shouldn't have crossed the border. It's illegal, and they committed a crime. Every food that you have, every piece of food that you eat, every piece of cotton and clothing that you wear is picked by an undocumented immigrant in one way or form.
And what's really grinds me is this idea, and this is the argument to defend this practice. They say, well, they are not from this country, so they are not deserving of those particular constitutional rights. And you hear this in other arguments as well. I believe they've used this kind of rhetoric to target people like Julian Assange, who's like he doesn't get the First Amendment because he's not a citizen in this country. I want to play this brief clip of just kind of what kind of precedent that is, and it's Judge Rodriguez who lays this out really eloquently. So I'm going to play this brief clip, and we'll hop right back.
On his or her own, without a neutral party looking at that decision to detain someone indefinitely?
Well, first of all, I would not accept the premise that this is indefinite detention. It's true that there is no outer limit in terms of a number of days, but it is detention that is specifically pending a determination of eligibility for asylum.
That assumes that determination is going to be done in some expeditious way, but we know as a matter of fact that these determinations can sometimes take years.
They can sometimes take a long time.
Deputy Solicitor General Malcolm Stewart would...
Actually, that was the wrong clip, but oh well, that's a good point too. But essentially, the point she makes is like, well, if they're not granted constitutional rights, does that mean we can torture them? Can we force them into slave labor? Which, well, according to another amendment in the Constitution, yes, you can. But yeah, that's the kind of precedent you leave when you make the argument that people in the United States or people who are not citizens do not deserve constitutional rights. And that is not the type of precedent that you want to have when you try to talk about the strength of American democracy. You got to practice what you preach. I mean, this may seem like kind of a jump, but look at like Abu Ghraib or Guantanamo, the kind of abuses that happen there. That gives fuel to fanatical groups to use in their messaging against the United States. And I mean, same with this. When we were in the Cold War, the Soviets used our mistreatment of the black population, our mistreatment against immigrants to point out how corrupt our country was. And the thing about that, they're absolutely right.
I mean, the greatest atrocity. Martin Luther King talked about this in a lot of his speeches about the inhumanity of America, from not being able to provide health care to the lack of living standards. This, if he was alive today, he would be absolutely appalled by what the Supreme Court has done. And I firmly believe that he would be absolutely appalled. Like Martin Luther King is somebody, like Martin Luther King and Malcolm X and other people, like those social activists. Those are people who I look up to when I'm judging how I should look at situations. And yeah, dog, this harkens back to internment camps. This harkens back to Trail of Tears. This harkens back to it reminds America of the vicious nature of America because of the others. It's because of the others. They are the others. They're not Americans. They're not us. They're human beings trying to make a better life for themselves in a place whose slogan is "Bring me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to break free." So it infuriates me to think that we would still be in this type of situation in this day and age. And also, keep in mind, folks, majority of undocumented immigrants are not coming from the southern border. They're flying over in a plane.
That's right.
And they're not brown-skinned people. Okay? Like, they're not. Ask Ivanka Trump how her grandparents are doing. You know?
Yep.
Like,
all right. I think why don't we go ahead and go to a break, and we come back. Got some more BS to call out. This is the Hoodrat Strategist radio program, only on 89.1 WIDR Kalamazoo, your only source for political revolution.
WIDR is proud to be supported by Pedal Bicycle. Pedal Bicycle has 2 locations on 611 West Michigan Ave and 185 Romans Road. More information can be found at pedalbicycle.com.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is the Hoodrat Strategist radio program, only on 89.1 WIDR Kalamazoo. So we're going to talk a little bit about, this is a story that has both kind of statewide and national implications, and it's really just another glaring example of the corrosive effect of money in our political system. This is from a Truth Out article. Blue Cross pressures employees to donate to opponent of single-payer candidates. And the example the article uses is the gubernatorial race right here in Michigan. Gretchen Whitmer is getting a lot of pressure, employees of Blue Cross Blue Shield are getting a lot of pressure to donate to Gretchen Whitmer. She does not support single-payer health care, neither does Blue Cross, who also, by the way, donates a substantial amount of money to Fred Upton. And, Blue Cross, they requested that its 8,100 employees support Whitmer for governor. And we've got 2 candidates who are very strong about single-payer, Abdul El Sayed and Shri Thanadar. And, this all goes back. Gretchen's, her dad was president of Blue Cross for 18 years. He's even got his own building named after him on the campus there. I'll read a quick quote from Adam Joseph. He's the communication director for Abdul's campaign, and he says, "This is a perfect example of how corporate politicians hold Democrats back, even as other party leaders like Cory Booker and Kristen Gillibrand are calling for Medicare-For-All and no corporate money corrupting our politics." So, we were talking about some other, the Democratic Party shenanigans. I think this ties into that pretty well.
Hold on. So, let me remind you, America, 80% of Democrats want universal single-payer Medicare for all. 80% of Democrats. Over 47% of Republicans want single-payer health care, compared to only 37% of them that do not. An overwhelming majority of Americans, no matter where you are on the political spectrum, want single-payer health care. And the Democrats are saying, hey, instead of listening to the American people, we're going to listen to Blue Cross Blue Shield and take this money.
No, that's right. And it's important to note too that this is just a couple weeks after there was a story that dropped part and parcel from the Michigan State Democratic Party, which threw some shade on Abdul's chances, because it said that he couldn't legally run in the state because he was living in New York for a while. Although if you actually look into it, that is legally dubious. He's been registered to vote here for the amount of time he needs in order to run for governor. But they're smearing, particularly Abdul, because he's the most high-profile progressive candidate in the gubernatorial race. He's actually got a lot of old Bernie staffers working on his campaign. But he's been very outspoken about the need for single payer, whether it happens at federal or state level. And, Gretchen, I think rightfully so, has been kind of pointed at as this seems like the establishment candidate that they're trying to throw at us. And this whole deal with Blue Cross Blue Shield, I think that just...
Doesn't Gretchen also have the backing of Governor Granholm?
Yep.
Okay. So it's not a question if she's the establishment's candidate. When Governor Granholm supports you, you're the establishment candidate.
Oh, yeah. And she's doing that thing that some of them are doing now. It's I'm progressive. I am. Look at my progressive credentials. It's okay. All right, Miss Blue Cross.
No. Okay, you're progressive? Cool. You support single-payer health care? No,
we need access, and we need to protect the ACA.
No. Now, and that's when you ask. Wait, it's a yes or no question. Yes or no? Do you support single payer Medicare for all health care? Yes or no?
I need universal health care, but
right. And when you hear that, that's a no. Then the next question would be, okay, cool. Do you support making the minimum wage a living wage and tying it to inflation? And if she says, then no. Do you support, I don't know, what other thing? Do you support net neutrality, free college and tuition, ending the 7-9 interventions that we're in now overseas, ending the drug war? Do you support the ending of private prisons and criminal justice reform? If you do not, and you're running as a Democrat, then I need you to bow your head in shame and leave the building, because you're not a Democrat. You're not a progressive. You are in the way of progress. This is the other point that I want to get at. This is not the first time the DNC and DCCC has been putting their foot on the scale. In Houston, Texas, there is a progressive Democrat who's running in Houston. The DCCC went out of their way to smear her. This is not a joke.
And, this is, by the way, if you don't know, that's Democratic Congressional Coordinating Committee.
Yeah. If you the lady's name, let me bring up the lady's name. In Houston, let me find this lady's name. The Democratic Party went out of their way to smear her because they are pushing a Democrat establishment instead. A Democrat establishment candidate instead. Two things happened after they smeared her. One, the lady Lauren Moser, who's the progressive. After the DCCC tried to smear her, her campaign raised $6,000 within 3 hours after that. So if she does not win, there's two things that are going to happen. If she does not win, the media and the Republicans are going to say, what happened to the DCCC and the DNC saying that they were neutral in their own party? Look at them rigging their election again. If she does win, the Republicans will use the smear that the DNC used on her against her.
Yep, that's right.
They will rather lose to a Republican than let a progressive win, because a progressive will change the system. It's the most disgusting thing I have seen since I've been covering politics.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned too, we were talking about the special election yesterday, and you said like some of their stupid strategy suggestions kind of helped sink that campaign too.
The DNC will what they've been doing in some special elections against progressive Democrats like Justice Democrats and others, they will force them into legal trouble. So they will question their voter rolls or things like that, so that the campaign, which is a grassroots campaign that doesn't have a lot of money, now have to spend money on getting a lawyer instead of getting their message out there. So the campaign that has less supporters but more money can put out their message and win. That's what just happened in one of the special elections. I forgot the special election. I think it was in I forgot the special election that just recently happened. But folks, the point that I'm getting at is primaries matter. Primaries matter because that's where we have a real choice. You cannot get mad in the general election if you do not vote in the primary. So we have primaries here in Kalamazoo that's coming up. You have different candidates like that are uncorrupted.
You're talking about congressional race?
Congressional races and everything else that's happening in Michigan. Support those who are not corrupt, who are not taking super PAC money. There are people here in Kalamazoo who are not taking super PAC money who are running. I forget their names, but I love y'all anyway.
Oh, and I'd also recommend, I didn't record anything from it, but Dana Nacelle, running for Attorney General, she just popped through Kalamazoo on Monday.
And I'm mad I missed it.
She has a really strong progressive platform. The rub, though, is that the primaries for Attorney General, those are not open to the public. You actually have to go to the Michigan Democratic Party convention in Detroit in order to vote on that. That's April 15th. And, I go back and forth. I'm still technically a registered Democrat, although I'm probably going to be switching to the Socialist Party soon. But if you just register as a Democrat, you can stop being one the day after the convention. But if you want to help out, get your vote there. There are rides and transportation being organized by her campaign to get people to the convention.
You have to look. I understand. I'm in that same boat. I'm been registered as a Democrat for all of my life before I actually understood policy. Because I used to be beforehand we used to talk about this back in high school. I used to just be Team Democrat, and I did not understand because just my family just supported whoever was just on mainstream TV. But when you actually when I actually started paying attention, I'm like, okay, there's some BS going on, but you can't affect change. You have to be informed, but you also need to support those who are not corrupt and who are not just going to give you lip service and not give you real change. But I have to go.
All right. I think that's a good place to leave it off at. When we come back, I'm going to take a quick break just to use a little boys' room. But we come back. We're on this topic. We're rolling on stock about DNC. I had another news story I wanted to talk about. It's an update on the DNC fraud lawsuit. So yeah, I'll be right back. This is the Hoodrat Strategist radio program, only on 89.1 WIDR Kalamazoo. My bed music ended, so I hope I didn't lose anybody in transition there. So, we were just talking about the corruption of various Democrats, be it DCCC, Gretchen Whitmer's peculiar connections with Blue Cross Blue Shield, and their particular stake in preventing Medicare-For-All or single-payer health care. So let's update an old story that just had a new development. This is talking about the DNC fraud lawsuit from last year. Now, if you weren't aware of it, and many of you probably weren't, since it didn't get any mainstream media coverage whatsoever, DNC fraud lawsuit was carried out by attorney Jared Beck to basically make the argument that the DNC defrauded the grassroots donors who gave money to the Bernie Sanders campaign after it was revealed by all of the leaked DNC emails that the primary was suspect. It was rigged. It was there was an internal bias against Sanders, and actually, as we've seen in the months since then, there's been nothing but more and more proof and evidence of that fact. Donna Brazil's big reveals essentially gives an institutional answer to why all that bias happened. The Hillary Clinton campaign literally controlled the DNC during the primary election. With that, some of the arguments made in the case were absolutely just unbelievable. The idea, and this is presented by the DNC's own attorney, that basically the Democratic Party had the right to rig their primary, that, quote unquote, if they wanted to, they could go back and choose the nominee while smoking cigars like they used to do. So, it's almost like, that kind of, that O.J. Simpson argument. Well, if I did it, it would have been okay. It would have been legal. And in the appeals process, they go one step even further. I'm going to read a little bit from this article. It's by Elizabeth Voss. It's published on February 26th, Mid-Press News. Headline is, DNC lawyers argue primary rigging is protected by the First Amendment. Oh, man. Okay. So, the document... this is... the defendants in the case, including the DNC and former DNC chairwoman Debbie Wasserman Schultz, filed a response brief that left many observers of the case at a loss for words. The document, provided by the law offices of the attorneys for the plaintiffs in the case, Jared and Elizabeth Beck, and appears to argue that if the Democratic Party did cheat Sanders in the 2016 presidential primary race, which at this point has basically been proven beyond a shadow of a doubt, I don't know anybody who's still claiming it wasn't rigged. Well, I do know some people who said, okay, it was rigged, but it was okay. It was okay to do. This whole idea that, like, Hillary Clinton put in the work of setting it up for herself, so why do you want to ruin her party? But that's a very, very small, insignificant portion of the voting public. The vast majority of the people understand intuitively, yeah, it was rigged against Bernie. So they argue if it was rigged, which it was, then that action was protected under the First Amendment. And it goes on to do basically make some attacks on Jared Beck's character. So they went on to argue that because Jared Beck's outspoken Twitter posts, the plaintiffs were using the litigation process for political purposes. And by the way, I am friends with Jared Beck on Facebook. We're not like close buds or anything, but we're in similar political circles. And he's pretty outspoken. He doesn't bite his tongue. In this, they refer to like Jared Beck referring to them as SHIT bags on Twitter, and he used some other colorful language to describe them. Degrading language in reference to defendants. Let's point out the irony that Jared Beck is using his Twitter and his Facebook to say these aggressive things about them. I believe that's protected under the First Amendment. I guess so is rigging a primary. But Jared Beck's rhetoric on social media does nothing to demean his actual legal arguments, which were strong enough to at least open up the window for an appeal. And in fact, the judge of the previous case did not dismiss it on the merits of the case, but much rather on legal technicalities that what was it? I'm sorry, I don't want to mischaracterize this. Essentially that it wasn't the open court, or it wasn't the court of law that could redress these grievances, that it would essentially have to be the voters kind of somehow. Granted, this was before Donna Brazil's drop came, and again, this more malfeasance was characterized. They also called out that attorney Jared Beck, and this is according to their words, repeatedly promoted patently false and deeply offensive conspiracy theories about the deaths of a former DNC staffer and plaintiff's process server in an attempt to bolster attention to the lawsuit. Now, they leave out something very important here, and it's that, Jared Beck they're talking about Seth Rich, and this is part of the whole theory that Seth Rich was the one who leaked the DNC leaks to WikiLeaks, and then, subsequently shot under very mysterious circumstances. No, I've talked about this on the show before, and my whole point with it is I don't dismiss it out of hand because there is a lot of compelling circumstantial evidence, but there's no smoke. Okay, that's poor choice of words, smoking gun. But the important thing to remember with this is that is it just completely beyond the pale that a political assassination like this could take place? No. If you look at American history, stuff like that has happened before, perhaps a little bit too often. And there's actually a forensic psychiatrist who said that didn't read as a typical mugging. They basically said it was either a serial killer or a really inept hitman, which, I mean, this is kind of joking and colloquial, but like inept hitman, that just screams DNC to me. Anyway, so there's a lot of dubious things that say this is within the realm of possibility. I am not going to go so far as to say that's definitely what happened, because again, it hasn't been proven. It's all very circumstantial, but I'm not going to dismiss it as a possibility. And it's fully within Jared Beck's rights to say, hey, look at all these things. They don't add up. I believe that Seth Rich was murdered for this reason, and I am going to talk about it on social media. And again, that's fully within his rights. It doesn't speak directly to the legitimacy of his case. And, he's not the only one. There are a lot of people who believe that. Again, I myself, I think there needs to be a little more definitive evidence, but I'm not going to dismiss it. Something smells about that. So, it goes on, this article. It says, the defense counsel failed to mention the motion for protection filed by the Becks earlier in the litigation process. They also failed to note the voice-modulated phone calls, and this is a true thing. This is reported by a lot of local Florida newspapers when it happened. They failed to note the voice-modulated phone calls received by the law offices of the Becks, which contained a caller ID corresponding to the law offices of Debbie Wasserman Schultz. And they were very, kind of pseudo-threatening. They were like, we want you to stop. It's like, what do you have on the DNC? I'm kind of paraphrasing, but that's basically what happened with these voice-modulated calls, which were proven to come from Debbie's office. Which again, this feels like it could be the plot of a Coen Brothers film. They're trying to do this cloak and dagger stuff, but they don't know how to do it. So, that's true. There are a lot of mysterious deaths of their colleagues that happened around the time of this case. And I can understand a lot of people, even in progressive circles, view Jared Beck as being a little problematic because he's very outspoken on these things. He talks about things that people would refer to as conspiracy theories. But there are some legitimately unnerving things that happened in the sphere of Jared and Elizabeth Beck that shouldn't be ridiculed or dismissed. So again, they don't have nothing. All they're doing is going after the attorney's character, and again, as kind of a way to dismiss and move the goalposts away from the actual argument. And the actual argument they're making is absolutely awful. It is our First Amendment right to rig our primaries. Oh, and by the way, the guy accusing of this is a crazy person. He's a crazy guy. He believes in conspiracy theories. He says mean things on social media. Well, you know what? He's also a damn good attorney. And he's calling out your BS. I want to wrap this up. One other thing I wanted to point out with this, and this is all 100% true, 100% real. Where did I find this? I found this on Mint Press News. I don't go to this source very often. A lot of people, it's very hard, anti-establishment left. There was also an article about it on Disobedient Media, but you don't find the Young Turks reporting on this. You don't find Democracy Now! Reporting on this. Even in a lot of anti-establishment leftist media circles, they have not reported on the DNC fraud lawsuit to the extent that they really should be doing. It's a very big deal. And granted, some outlets have been a little bit better and more responsive to this lawsuit than others. But again, treating this with any kind of skepticism based on the character of the attorney, which, again, he's being accused of nothing but basically having an open mind and being rude towards establishment politicians. It's silly, and the merits of the case are strong. And if the DNC attorneys keep making horrible justifications like this, it'll be worth it. Most people don't know about it because, very few media sources are reporting on it. So you heard it from me, Mint Press News, the article. Look it up. DNC fraud lawsuit. Apparently, engaging in electoral malfeasance is a First Amendment right. Right. Okay, we're going to take a quick little break. When we come back, we're going to have on our friend of the show, Eugene Strong. We're going to talk about that statue in the park. You are listening to the Hoodrat Strategist radio program only on 89.1 WIDR Kalamazoo, your only source for political revolution.
Alvan Humane Society is a non-for-profit, no-kill animal shelter that has been serving Allegan, Van Buren, and surrounding areas for almost 50 years. They are hosting their Cares Fund Drive and are over halfway to their $500,000 goal. Alvan can currently house around 30 dogs and 100 cats. Money raised from the Cares campaign will go to build a new shelter, which will expand this capacity by 20%. Alvan Humane Society has 20 dogs and 40 cats that are microchipped, spayed and neutered, and fully vaccinated, ready for adoption right now. To adopt a pet, donate to the Cares Fund Drive, or find out more, feel free to visit them on the web at www.al-van.org.
Wider Battle of the Bands would like to thank Kelvin & Co. for supporting Radio Evolution. Located at 232 East Michigan Avenue, Kelvin & Co. is an all-natural barbecue joint. To find more information about their food options, you can call 269-350-5236 or visit kelvinandcompany.com.
I like digging holes and hiding things inside them. When I grow old, I hope.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. We are back. We are now joined by a special guest, Eugene Strong, and we're going to be coming back to a topic that has come up far too often on the show, unfortunately. We're going to be talking about the Pioneer statue in the park. So, Eugene, could you just introduce yourselves to the listeners real quick, and maybe tell them a little bit about kind of the history of our recent activism dealing with this racist statue in the park.
Okay, Ani, hello, and I'm very glad to be on the show, and I'm very glad to be talking to all of you. It's a very loving place, and thank you. And as for the statue, well, that is not loving. I think it's a disgrace for the city. I've said before that, the city claims to be progressive, but as long as they have that statue, that fountain statue, it is a regressive city. And I think, the last time when I was in at the commissioners meeting there, and Bobby Hopewell said that he was going to basically be like Pontius Pilate and wash his hands of the problem, and he would leave it up to the Gun Lake tribe as to what would occur with that fountain. And I thought that was a real cop-out, and I think he's for doing that. I think it was very disgraceful, to say the very, that's to be as kind as I can be on that. I think when you look at that, when you look at the real situation, he's saying that he'll put it up to the Gun Lake tribe to make their comment. But the whole problem here is that the land was taken away. Yes, it was Gun Lake land, but it was taken, and the county owns the land. That Bronson Park is owned by Kalamazoo County, which in turn leases it to Kalamazoo City. And so the city, under their sweetheart deal, where they pay very little for the lease, they are responsible for that park. They can do whatever they want with that park, basically. And so it's up to them as to what's going on in that park. If Gun Lake came in, I would love to see it. If they would come in and say, we don't just want the park out of there, we want the park. Give us the whole park. I'd like to see what would happen then. Under Bobby Hopewell's logic, that's what should be done then. Give the land to Gun Lake, and then let them make the decision as to what occurs in that park.
Oh yeah, that's a very great point. I mean, if the land originally was where they were settled, then why shouldn't we just give it back to them? I did want to and I'm sorry I didn't do this at the beginning. Just if you're just tuning in, if you're not sure exactly what we're talking about. When we said the racist statue, we're talking about in Bronson Park, there is a statue called the Fountain of the Pioneers. If you don't know what you're looking for, a lot of people miss it. It's an Art Deco style, but it depicts a white colonial settler standing over a native individual. He's like holding either a rifle or a stick. I never could quite figure it out. And this has been the subject of no small degree of conversation and controversy for a number of years now, but most pointedly recently in the wake of Charlottesville and the discussion about these other kind of racist white supremacist statues across the country, it's come back up in the context of the statue that we have in Kalamazoo. So you already touched on this a little bit, Eugene, but I wanted to kind of ask some of the unique difficulties with this statue in Kalamazoo. And one of the things I noticed so pointedly at the last city commission meeting is, we don't have overt racists or Confederates, preaching for this statue to stay there. It was a lot of what you might consider the kind of white liberal class. And I was wondering if you could kind of speak to that a little bit. You know, they came there talking about like art and history. What is your response to basically a bunch of rich white people trying to justify that statue being there in the park?
Well, I guess first, I think when you say it that way, I think of how the city has they hit on it, saying that there's one building near City Hall in Kalamazoo that is the headquarters of the KKK there. That might be a good way of saying what's going on as far as the ones who are in favor of that, of a racist statue. I mean, what culture is really hurt the most in this country? It's the native culture, of course, because I mean, you look at the way it was 1,000 years ago. There were over 300 million native people on this continent, and at the end of World War II, there were 56,000. That is the largest case of genocide in the history of the world, and Adolf Hitler had studied the way that the natives were treated in this country, and that's the way he did with his genocide against the Jewish people. And if they really look into it, you'll see that he was doing one of the last steps in genocide, and that is to, in order to have genocide, you erase that people from the face of the earth. And so he was trying to eliminate all of the grave sites, so that there was nothing left of the Jewish people. There was no sign of them ever being on the earth. And when you think about the native people, I mean, we're the only culture that has to have a card saying that we're native people in this country, and they ask for blood quantum, and there's such a uproar over blood quantum. A lot of people say if you have 1 drop of native blood in you, you're native. If you have a quarter or an eighth or a half, the deal is, whenever they're saying that, what they're trying to do is dilute it. If they can dilute it enough, then they say there is no native people left in this country, and so now we don't have to honor the treaties, and now we can take the land, and we can take all the resources available on that land, and when they have it diluted to a degree like they're trying to do, this is what's occurring. It's still, the genocide continues. It has not stopped. And when you see a statue like that, the ones who are hurt the very most by it are the children and their children, because they have to see that. They have to go to school, and they have to be told about that statue that just depicts them as less than. And we're people. We're all people in this country. We are all people. We all bleed red.
Can I ask you, and this is kind of, I don't know if you'd call it devil's advocate or just kind of, I'll ask a question channeling like the kind of the rich white talking point about that statue. So I know one of the commissioners, I interviewed him on the show leading up to November, and his main sticking point, besides it being like, oh, it's a work of art and history, was that, oh, well, yes, the statue, it's offensive, it's from another time, it starts a conversation. How would you respond to somebody saying that it's somehow important to be there in order to, what do you say, like spark a dialogue about history?
I'll start a dialogue with history too, according to their master plan. Their master plan says that they want to take the street signs in Kalamazoo, and they want to give each street sign a cute native name to honor the native people in turn for leaving them have their statue. Well, they did the same thing in Berlin, if I remember. So that's a good conversation to bring up. We'll talk about the Nazis and how they did their stuff, because now what they're doing is Hitler reverted to the native people. Now these people are reverting to Hitler. That would be a good way that this guy could have his big topic brought up. It's racism, and it's degrading. And why degrade people? Look what they're doing to the Dreamers. They're throwing them out of the country. What a disgrace. I mean, what they should then do is cut down the liberty of the Statue of Liberty and send it back to France, because it doesn't stand for bringing the people in anymore. Those are good topics there. What do you think?
So let me ask you something about, you brought up a little earlier about how, these things are still going on. One of the things that I've brought up at a couple of the meetings is, when we talk about the oppression that Native peoples in this country have to deal with, it isn't past tense. And particularly when you're talking about the domination of the white settler over the native, this is a continuing problem. And for those at home who might not know about like some of the main crises and kind of modern forms of that oppression against native folks, could you tell people how does that domination of the white man really show itself today in 21st century America?
Standing Rock. Look at what the oil companies are doing. They bypass the main city, Bismarck, and run their pipeline through the native reservation. And once they do that, because the natives keep on yelling that, the pipeline's going to break, well, it didn't break in Bismarck, so it didn't destroy their water, but it broke on the reservation. And thousands of gallons of crude oil went into the soil of the native people in South Dakota, and it went into the aquifers, and it went into the wells. That's just one of the ways. I mean, they take the land, and they're given the land. The oil companies are run by the rich white people, of course. I spoke with a guy. He is running for Congress here in Minnesota. I won't say his name, but we had a long discussion, and he said to me, Eugene, he said, what would it take if we gave the native tribes each $1 million a year for the next 1,000 years? Would that appease the native people? And I looked at him and I said, but the thing is, what is the value of one human life? Just one. Now, look at the value of 290 million lives. How can money appease a culture? And he didn't get it. He just did not get that. And my true comment is, we don't want money. Honor the treaties. You made 550 treaties with us, and not one of them have ever been kept. Not one treaty that they've made with us has ever been kept. Honor the treaties. That's all. Just honor the treaties. And they won't do that because the treaties they made were all made up, and they were all lies to get more and more.
So, bringing it back, let's again get a little bit more local. So with the mayor kind of passing the buck to the Gun Lake tribe, do you know what is the latest on their stance? And from last I heard, they basically gave the city a very tacit, you decide what to do with it, or were okay with it being there with all of this other part of the master plan where it's referencing the history. But what is the, obviously, the Gun Lake tribe may have claim to their ancestors being on that land, but there are also many other native folks who come to that park day in and day out. So just, I guess, asking, like, where how do you see that kind of conflation of consent? And again, what do you see for the fact that, again, like, native peoples, urban natives have to be in that park every day versus whatever the wishes of the Gun Lake tribe might be?
Well, what I think is, I don't speak for Gun Lake, and I'm not with the Nachi-Nachi-Wish. I know some people there, and I love them very dearly. But I look at it for the people, and the people deserve much better than this. This is a disgrace. They have a meeting coming up on the 5th. I encourage everyone to be there. Everyone. You should just pack that hall. And because they have to let everyone speak. What really got me is that there's supposed to be a time for the public to speak. Now they have said that the public can only speak on their one topic this time, on the fountain. I encourage everyone to go in there and speak. If you just go up there and say, hello, I'm against this fountain, and stand there for 4 minutes and take up their time. Make those people sit at their desk for all night if you have to. But they're wrong, and if their decision is to keep the statue, there will be people still marching in protest, in peaceful protests, but it will continue to go on, and the city will continue to be known as a regressive city. And if they allow the statue, I hope we can pass petitions and ask for a recall of all the commissioners, because I think they're a disgrace.
Yep, that's true. And, it's very interesting that last meeting, you had a couple of commissioners who had a much more solid stance on the statue until, you had that person bring the presentation about how much money had been basically funneled towards the restoration of the statue. And then everybody seemed to get a lot more wishy-washy after that. Pardon me. So you mentioned this is the 5th, and they kind of passed the buck last time people organized around this, which was back in November. And they said they're going to make the final vote on Monday night. So what ideally, if they do vote to take it down, what would you like to see happen either to the statue? What is like the best case scenario for you?
The best case scenario, in my opinion, what they should do with the statue is contact the guy that they brought in from Chicago, who is the curator of the Linnelli Museum in Chicago, which is where the artist was from, and have them come up, give them the statue, let them remove it, take it down, and put it on display in the Linnelli Museum. That is the best case scenario. If they don't want to do that, then take it down and put it, how about maybe like in the lobby at City Hall? That might be a good place for it. And they can look at how regressive they are forever. And that's what they should do. But the thing is it doesn't belong. It does not belong on that piece of land, because that piece of land is sacred. And the one thing that they refuse to speak about is the mound that's on that land, in that park. And they don't even acknowledge it. They just mow over it like it's just a little rough in the turf there.
And explain to our listeners the significance of that mound? Because I think a lot of people probably see it every day. Maybe they've sat on it and they don't really know what it means.
Oh, that's a burial site. There were bodies in there. Everything's been removed. There's two terms known for that. One is called sacrilege, and one is called desecration. They robbed the grave. They took everything out of there. There were 12 remains in there that we know of through the recorded history that we had looked through. But there's nothing. The only thing that was left in there was a jar that they put in there, I don't know, a couple decades ago, and they thought it was real cute, doing it like a time vault or something. But that's the only thing that's there now. They removed everything. Well, where is everything? And that should be the main discussion of all of it. The statue is a disgrace. That's their little mark of superiority over the native people. But then you've got the mound that has been completely desecrated, and there's nothing left but a patch of grass where they can take their dogs to take a poop on.
Yeah, so I guess point of fact, ladies and gentlemen, if you are walking your dog near that park, don't let them poop on the mound. With that in mind, Matt Milzeric, who he did not seek another term as city commissioner, but one of the points he made at one of the last meetings that he was still a city commissioner is that we might not vote to take this down today, but it will go down someday. People are going to look back on it with embarrassment, and people are going to ask us why we didn't decide to do this sooner. So, with all of these events that go on down at the park, what would you tell people who see that statue every day and really like what it means, and furthermore, do you also believe that it is inevitable that it's going to be taken down at some point?
Yes, I do. Truth always comes out in the end. I have a thing real quick I had seen from George Orwell, and it said, the more a society drifts from the truth, the more it will hate those who speak it. And as long as that statue is there, that's not truth. That statue does not represent truth, because the fact is we're still here, and we are not under the thumb of the white superiority or the Christian superiority. We're people, and we can still pray in the way that we've been brought up to pray, to worship. And as long as we have that, we can teach our children to walk in love. That's what we do. We walk in love. And that statue does not represent love in any way.
And that quote, I think you know what you're talking about. I got a lot of hate on the internet for talking about the kinds of things that I talk about on the show. But specifically with the statue, Ian Ellie, the artist himself, talking about the meaning of the statue. And some people try to paint this as a positive point, that he was a progressive or he was a socialist in his era, and that he was trying to be respectful in that own cultural context. But even within that, according to his own words, the artist who made the statue, it was to depict the noble subjugation of the native. And as you said, that is a lie, because one, there's nothing noble about it, and two, I don't see any subjugation with the native peoples, that especially those who I've stood with here in Kalamazoo and at Standing Rock. If anything, I see a legacy of great noble resistance. And And that's that. If you could replace that statue, would you? Is that what should be there? Something that symbolizes noble resistance?
What should be there is what was there in their beginning, and that was there were magnificent gardens. Remove the fountains and replace them with the gardens. Those were the gardens that would have been the ancient eighth wonders of the world.
All right, Eugene. Well, we're just about out of time, but I want to make sure. So if people are passionate about this, they want to help in some way, how can they do that?
Go to the meeting on the 5th and speak. And what I will say is this. There's a quote, and it said, "All things good on this earth flow into the city because of the city's greatness." Kalamazoo is a great city. It's just being run by some people who are making it not so great.
All right. That is very, very true. Eugene, I want to thank you so much for being on the program. Much love and solidarity to you, my dear brother. And I will say, I personally am going to try to be there. I may be otherwise engaged. There is another symbol, or I guess I should not a symbol so much, but a purveyor of white supremacy, going to be in Lansing on March 5th. Mr. Richard Spencer is going to be at Michigan State University. Dear listeners, if you have not heard about that, but I will say to everybody, if you're going to be in town and you feel strongly about this is something you can definitely do. Just head to that city commission meeting, which starts at, I believe, 7 p.m. over at City Hall.
Andy, I love you, and I love all your listeners, and thank you so much for the time.
All right. Thank you, Eugene, and have a great night. All right. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you so much for tuning in. This has been the Hoodrat Strategist radio program. We're on every Wednesday from 5 to 7. If you want to go back and listen to the show, we upload them onto YouTube after the fact. And we have a Facebook page, the Hoodrat Strategist radio program, that is. Anyway, I want to go ahead and sign off. Thank you all, and keep on fighting for that revolution solution.